Hello everybody, in this video we're going to take a look at some common modeling problems, how to find them, and how to fix them. So here we have a mesh of this teddy bear character, and it has a number of problems with it, a number of problems that we should fix. So I'm going to show you some of my strategies for finding those problems and for fixing them. So first, let's take a look at some of the strategies for finding the problems. One very simple way of finding problems is, of course, to simply look at the mesh and look at areas maybe where it looks like it's shading strangely. And we can see some of those areas initially. What you'll notice when I rotate around is that there appears to be something going on down the middle of the character. There appears to be something happening in the leg here, the arm as well, and actually you can see that there's something going on here as well in this kind of eye area of the teddy bear. And actually, as I revolve around this and take a look at it, it looks like there could be a problem in the snout area right around here as well. Another strategy that I use for finding modeling problems is, once again, selecting the mesh and pressing 3 on my keyboard. What does that do? Well, it puts it into a smooth proxy mode. In other words, it shows us what the mesh will look like if we were to do a mesh smooth on it. And I can toggle between these states of 1 being the way that our mesh actually is, and 3 in the proxy mode. And sometimes some of the modeling mistakes will pop out at me there when I do that. And once again, I can determine that there's something happening in this arm here. There's something happening in the right side of the character here around where maybe the eye would be. It looks like there could be something happening here as well on the right arm. As you can see, these edges are not drawing straight lines here. There's something going on there. They're kind of crooked looking lines there. So that could be an issue. And also we can see that there's an issue here on the leg. So that's another technique I use for determining some of those problem areas in our mesh. Again, remember, it's just toggling between 1 and 3 on your keyboard. Yet another technique I use is, but this one will show a very specific kind of problem. In my viewport, I will go to Shading and turn on what is called Backface Culling. And when I turn that, I can see immediately that there is an issue here on the arm, that these faces at the end of the arm are pointing inward rather than outward. So that's an issue that I'm going to need to fix. And yet another way, another technique I use for finding problems in the mesh is selecting the mesh and going to Mesh, Cleanup, and opening up its tool settings. I'm going to reset them so that they're set to their default. And what you'll see is that we have a number of different options here. We have 2 different operations that we can apply. We can either clean up the problem areas, have Maya automatically clean them up, or we can have Maya select the matching polygons. In this case, it'll just show us where the problems are. We can, if we're having Maya fix those problems, we can have them fix some of these issues with tessellation. Really the only one that we need to look at here for this example is going to be the faces with more than 4 sides. Typically, you want your polygon faces to be quads, 4-sided, or in the case of maybe having some triangles or 3-sided faces, that's fine too. Or also removing geometry. And some of the ones that we'll look at here would be this non-manifold geometry, edges with 0 length, faces with 0 geometry area. We'll take a look at those examples. So this tool can clean up, it can fix many of those modeling problems on its own. So let's give that a try. I said that 4-sided faces can be a problem, non-manifold geometry can be a problem, edges with 0 length, faces with 0 geometry area, those can all be problems, so I'll check them and we'll go ahead and apply and fix this mesh. Now, I don't really like what it's done here. As you can see, it's converted everything into triangles. Actually, not everything. It didn't even fix this area here that's a problem. This was not really a very good solution. Let me undo that. I think that we're going to have better results if we fix these issues by hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my cleanup option operation to select matching polygons instead. In fact, let me just reset, select matching polygons, and we'll take a look at a couple of these individual problems. We'll look at them, we won't check them all at first. We'll just find some of them by themselves so that we can really determine what the issue is with the mesh. Let's take a look at the first one, which will be the faces with more than 4 sides. And if I check that, again with the select matching polygons selected and I apply, it indicates that we have a problem here, we have a problem here, and we have a problem here. I also recommend pressing 4 on your keyboard and just making sure there aren't any other problems that you might not be seeing that might be happening on the interior of your mesh. So these are the problems, the problem areas 1, 2, and 3. These areas we have a problem with faces with more than 4 sides. Let's take a look at if there are any other problems with this. I'll go ahead and check the manifold, non-manifold geometry here, and we'll apply that. And that indicates that we have an issue here on the left arm, and we have a problem here on the left leg. If we look at the interior, we can also see if there's any hidden problems that we're not seeing in shaded mode. So we know then that those are some problem areas that we need to fix. Let's go ahead and try another option. I'm going to uncheck the non-manifold geometry and we'll look for edges with 0 length. And this would happen if you had, for instance, 2 vertices right on top of one another. And the edge then between those 2 vertices has no length to it because the 2 sides are right on top of one another. We'll apply, and it does not appear that we have any problems with that. Let's try faces with 0 geometry area. So mesh is selected, we'll apply, and it indicates, here you can see why I need to go into wireframe mode, because I couldn't actually see it in shaded mode for some reason. But it indicates that there is a problem right here with faces that have no area to them. In other words, they could be 4-sided quads, but they actually don't have any area. So we'll take a look at that and we'll see if we can fix all of these different problems with the mesh. So now that we've determined where the problems are, let's go ahead and see about fixing them. But we won't let Maya fix it on its own. We're going to manually fix it because we're going to be able to do a better job. So the first problem, because it jumps out at me right away, is this problem here with the normals being reversed Remember that these faces in the arm are pointing inward rather than outward. We need to flip them. We need to reverse them. So I'm going to select those faces, and I'm going to go to Mesh Display, Reverse. And that will flip those faces so that they are now pointing in the right direction. They're pointing outward instead of inward. That problem is fixed. Another problem, if you remember, was here in the snout area. And if we zoom in on that area where it indicated that there was a problem, you'll see what the problem is here. Notice that these edges here feeding into this vertex look very crooked. The reason for that is that these are not quads. If we go to vertex mode, you'll notice that there's a number of vertices that just seem out of place. Sometimes this can happen if you've deleted edges and it left the vertices behind. So there are a couple ways that we could fix that. One way in this situation that we could fix this problem and make these 4 faces into quads would be to go to our modeling toolkit and use target weld and simply weld these vertices like that. In fact, another way that I could fix this problem also is to simply select these vertices and delete them. Now this area should be fixed. These are now quads. Another area, if you remember, that was an issue was over here in what is kind of like the eye area. If you remember, we looked at it and you could see here it's shading very strangely. You also remember that if we press 3 on our keyboard, you can see that something strange is happening there that is not happening on the left side. This is a very common problem. What happens is that someone will do an extrude but then not complete the action. They won't pull out or pull in the extrude. They won't scale the extrude. So what happens is that you have an extrude on here that just hasn't been pulled out. That means that these faces here, this face, these faces right here, this one, and this one, for instance, they have no area to them. They're 4-sided, but they have no actual area. And we don't need them. We can get rid of those. And there's a very simple way to get rid of them, and that is by merging vertices. Let's take a look at another way that we can look at this actually. I'm going to come in here and select those vertices that appear to be a problem here. Actually, I don't think I picked the right ones, so here, let's just take a look. Oh, no, I think I did pick the right ones, okay. Oh, I just need to pick these as well. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to just look in the back and make sure I haven't selected anything accidentally. What you'll notice is that it looks like I only have 6 vertices selected, but in fact, I have 12 vertices. That's because there are vertices right on top of one another. But if I select them, what I can do is go to Edit Mesh, Merge. And what that will do is merge the vertices that are right on top of one another. So I'll go ahead and do that. And now what you'll notice is that we in fact only have 6 vertices. And if I press 3 on my keyboard, we don't get that strange situation where the right side looks different than the left side. Another area that we determined was a problem is this area here in the arm. And we can see what the problem is actually by zooming in on it. The problem is that these are not quads, they are 6-sided faces. So if I select this face here, if we select its edges, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 edges here. Instead of having these be 6-sided faces, we should probably break them up into quads. And how did this happen? Well, we've got these vertices here. I don't want to delete them because I actually want it more like this side here. This side seems to have those edges here. This side does not. Probably once again, these edges were selected and then accidentally deleted. But we'll just reintroduce the edges. And the way that we'll do that is using our multi-cut tool. And I'll just redraw those edges in here. And press enter. And that problem now should be fixed. Another area that we determined was a problem was over here in the leg. This is actually a very similar problem to the arm here. It's not exactly apparent just looking at it, but you remember if we press 3 on our keyboard, we'll see that there's something happening there, something a little bit strange, the way that those edges are being drawn. In fact, if we go to vertex mode, you'll know it's the same problem as the arm. We have these 6-sided faces here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, with the arm, you'll remember that what we did was draw a new edge loop in here using our multi-cut tool to connect these vertices. But with this one, to make it more like the left leg, I think I want to actually get rid of these vertices. So I'm simply going to select them and delete them. And now the right leg has been fixed. Now, there was another problem here in the left leg. This one is a very interesting problem. If we press 3 on our keyboard, you'll notice that it is smoothing very strangely. In fact, if I go to my wireframe mode, you'll be able to see inside there are these interior edges. In fact, there are these interior faces on the inside of the leg. And we need to get rid of that. In fact, these faces can be a little bit difficult to select to get rid of them. Let's see how we can go about it. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this area here that's a problem. And if we want, we can go inside the mesh and see them here. Here they are. And we could select them to delete them. That's one way that we could get them. You see how I have these faces selected in here, but when we see them on the outside, you don't see them. That's what's causing the problem there. That can be a little bit tricky. That can be a little tricky to pick them that way. We could also pick them using that cleanup tool, going to Mesh, Cleanup, and let's see, that problem would be the, let's see, well, we could try faces sharing all edges. And in fact, that did select it. You can see that it selected it, the faces sharing all edges. With it selected now, we can delete it. That's fixed. Another way that we could select those faces would be this way. I'm going to select these faces here. Now, let me just make sure I don't have those faces selected up there. Select these faces, select these faces, invert my selection by holding down Shift. As you can see, that selected those interior faces, and we'll delete them. And that problem should now also be fixed. Now, you remember in the very beginning of this video that I said that one of the ways that you could find some of the problems is to simply look at the mesh. We've already fixed a number of the problems, but looking at it, you can see that there's still some strange, even though we fixed these problems, there's still some strange shading happening in the leg here, in the arm here, and in the eye, even though we fixed those problems. So they're fixed. They're not a problem anymore, but they're still rendering as hard edges. I'm going to select my mesh, and I'm simply going to go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and it's going to soften all of the edges on my whole model. And when I do that, you'll notice that we no longer have that issue there on the arm, or on the leg, or on the eye. We do, however, have some strange shading happening down the middle of our mesh here. And nothing has indicated that there is any problem there. So let's find out what's going on with the middle of our mesh. This is in fact a very common problem because when you're modeling a character, for instance, something that is symmetrical, oftentimes you'll just model half of it, mirror it, and then combine. The issue arrives with, let me just pick one of these a vertex in the middle. If I move that vertex, you'll notice that in fact these vertices are not welded together. They're simply on top of one another. In fact, I could double click on one of these on a vertex on the mesh. It'll select everything it can until it gets to this area where these have not been merged. And as you can see, I can still break this apart. I need to merge these vertices down the middle. Now, one way I could do that is select all the vertices down the middle, being very careful not to select anything else. And you'll notice that we have 136 vertices selected. Now, if I go to Edit Mesh, Merge, you'll notice that it brought the number down to 68 because it's merged all those vertices that are more or less on top of one another. If they're right on top of one another, it will merge them. We in fact don't need to be that careful with this though. I'm going to undo that. And I'm simply going to select all the vertices on my whole mesh, 1,110 vertices. And I'm going to once again go to Edit Mesh, Merge, and it brings it down to 1042 because remember, it's trying to just merge the vertices that are more or less right on top of one another. In fact, it's taking this distance threshold, which is set to a very small number, so that it'll only merge the vertices that are more or less right on top of one another. The only areas that we would have to be careful would be these areas here where the vertices are fairly close to one another, but as long as they are greater than the distance threshold, this method will work fine for merging those vertices. Let's see what happens if I make that threshold larger. You'll notice that it starts merging more vertices together based on their distance from one another. So we still have that edge going down the middle, but if we select one of those a single vertex and we move it, you'll see it in fact has been merged. If I double click on this, it selects the whole mesh. If I double click on a vertex, it selects the whole mesh. What I can do once again is go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and now we shouldn't have that strange shading going down the middle of our mesh. So now that we've gone through and fixed a number of the problem areas on our mesh, we've built up quite a bit of history, as you can see here. So at this point, what I would do is delete that history by going to Edit, Delete by Type, History. So we've fixed a number of problems with this mesh. It should be pretty solid now. The reasons for fixing these is that it helps with shading. It makes it less likely that your model or your Maya file is going to go corrupt. And also, other software packages such as game engines or Mudbox will be able to better accept these meshes without there being any problems. Software like Mudbox is much more particular about the modeling than Maya is for it to be able to function properly in that software. And by fixing these problems before we bring it into software such as Mudbox, we're much less likely to encounter any problems, and we're much more likely to get better results. So I'm going to go ahead and try to export this out to Mudbox now. My mesh is selected. I'll go to File, Send to Mudbox, Send as New Scene, and our model came in without any problems. We can now up the resolution on it and start sculpting it here in Mudbox. Finally, before wrapping up this video, I've reverted back to the original file here because if you have access to this file, if I've given you access to this file, what I'd like you to take note of is that here in the layers, if you make visible this layer called hidden, you'll actually see that I pinpoint exactly where the modeling problems are. So if you're interested in trying to fix these problems yourself to get a little bit of practice about finding modeling mistakes and fixing them, here's a convenient way to determine where those problems are so that you can try to fix them. So I hope that this video has been useful for you, and thank you for watching.